When the Watchers descend from the heavens to take the mortal women for themselves, we are led to believe from the Book of Enoch that the women are entirely acquiescent. Whether they are genuinely enticed or taken against their will is generally left up to the reader's imagination. Various Jewish legends indicate that the original writers were not unanimous in their depictions of this event. Some specify that the Watchers took on the disguise of beautiful men, and thus coerced and lured the women away from their husbands with their good looks. Others suggest the Watchers were far more forceful, ignoring the protests of the women and having their way with them. Another lesser-known legend I found in Schwartz's Tree of Souls, a compendium of Jewish tales, tells us that the Watchers didn't necessarily stop at the women, but fornicated with men, and to a lesser extent, even the animals. But there does exist a legend of at least one woman who was able to resist the beauty of the Watchers, or who stood up to these predatory beings and denied them of what they wanted. In fact, as we'll see in today's episode, this very woman proceeded to even outsmart the wicked angels, and made such an impression on God, she was then spared the same fate as everyone else. Her name was Istahar. For those who aren't well aware of the Enoch narrative, we are told that before the days of the flood, angels, known as Watchers, descended from the heavens with the sole intention of taking and marrying the mortal women, of whom they found irresistibly beautiful. This dastardly moment takes place behind the back of God, who, for whatever reason, either doesn't notice it happening, or does know it's happening and allows it to transpire anyway. After having fornicated with the mortal women, the Watchers don't return to the heavens as originally intended, but rather remain on the earth and teach mankind all the forbidden secrets of heaven: herb gathering, root cutting, alchemy, sorcery, astrology, and even how to wage war on each other. As a result of this imparted wisdom, humanity began to practice these forbidden arts and spiraled into wickedness and impurity. What's more, the women gave birth to the sons of the Watchers, monstrous giants known as the Nephilim, who possessed such an insatiable hunger, they proceeded to consume and destroy both their mortal counterparts and the very earth itself. This then becomes the reason in the Enoch narrative as to why God sends the flood, unlike in Genesis, where the flood is sent to purge a more vague wickedness that's described in the traditional account. Whilst it's a pretty vivid, and some might even say fantastical account that supplements what one might read in Genesis, it does leave for some glaring questions. Were all the women taken by the Watchers, or only a select unlucky few? Were these women deceived by the wicked angels into surrendering their bodies, or were they simply taken against their will? Did the women put up a fight against their angelic suitors, and if they did, what might have happened to them? Again, whilst the traditional account in 1 Enoch leaves this to the reader's imagination, additional Jewish legends provide some key details that not only answer some of these burning questions, but also enhance the broader story. In the compendium of Jewish legends, known as the Tree of Souls, we are told of a more alternative approach to the Enoch narrative, where the principal watcher Semyaza and the most notorious watcher Azazel are actually shown to originally be somewhat good-intentioned. At the very least, they aren't shown to be sexually frustrated angels lusting after the mortal women, but rather appear to be neutral angels that are so confident in their purity that they don't believe they could ever commit a sin. However, their arrogance becomes a little more defined when they challenge God that they do not believe the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, could ever affect their goodliness. This Yetzer Hara is believed in Jewish schools of thought to be the innate cognitive inclination amongst humans to act selfishly, pursue desire, and commit sin. Whilst it is believed in some schools of thought to be a human trait, there are some Jewish legends that propose that this Yetzer Hara affects all living creatures that inhabit the earth, and that even divine or celestial beings are not immune to it. Semyaza and Azazel are shown to become more emboldened in their conversation with God. Not only do they feel God's regret for having created mankind in the first place, but they also highlight themselves as being far superior, incapable of committing sin. Even if they were under the influence of Yetzer Hara, even you would be overpowered by it, God tells them. But this doesn't seem to dissuade the angels at all, who further demonstrate their conceitedness. They protest, saying, "Let us descend to the world of humans, and let us show you how we will sanctify your name." From this, we understand that the descent of the Watchers, at least these two Watchers, was not a sexually motivated affair, but rather something a little more humble, if not foolish. Like the infant siblings attempting to impress their father through some ill-begotten and dangerous act, so too do the Watchers, even against their God's warning, proceed to try the impossible. They descend to the earth with the expectations of being impervious to the evil inclination, but in a matter of moments, they are drawn to the mortal women and are stunned by their beauty. Unable to control themselves, they forgot their original intentions of demonstrating their resolve to their God and proceed to do the exact opposite, taking the mortal women and making lovers of them. Of these women, we are told that Azazel desired Naamah, the daughter of Lamech, and the sister of Tubal-Cain, said in some legends to be the most beautiful woman in the pre-flood world. Meanwhile, Semyaza desired another beautiful maiden named Istahar, said to have been the last of the virgins, and the only woman in the pre-flood earth who was eligible but had not married. This woman Semyaza became obsessed with, and when she rejected him and fended off his advances, it only made him want her all the more. "I am an angel," he revealed to her. "You cannot refuse me." Istahar was not intimidated by this, however. Instead, she proceeded to negotiate with the angel, telling him that she would only give herself to him if he could tell her the ineffable name of God. Now, Semyaza knew that revealing such a thing would be a great transgression, for no mortal was permitted to know such a word, and no celestial being was permitted to reveal it. To this, Istahar mocked Semyaza, claiming that he probably didn't know the name himself, and was likely not important enough to have that sort of knowledge. She baited him with insults, defaming his character, even implying that the reason why he could not say God's ineffable name was because he wasn't really even an angel. This was the final straw for Semyaza, who then, to save his own pride, taught her the ineffable name. With this, Semyaza believed he was victorious, for the woman would now have to concede to him and become his wife. As soon as Istahar learned the ineffable name, however, she pronounced it from her lips and flew up to the heavens. Indeed, as much as we see Lilith in the alphabet of Ben Sira fly out of the Garden of Eden after uttering God's true name, so too did this Istahar gain the ability of flight, for which she used to ascend to the divine realm. Now God saw all this unfold, and he declared, "Because Istahar removed herself from sin, let her be set among the stars." And with that, Istahar was transformed into a star, one of the brightest in the sky, the only woman on the earth to have not only escaped the Watchers, but to have outsmarted them too. When Semyaza saw this unfold, he realized the error of his ways, and proceeded to repent. He then inflicted upon himself a most tremendous punishment, hanging himself upside down between the heavens and the earth. Readers might draw parallels between this tale and the likes of Job's prelude in the Bible. The Watchers in this legend are shown to challenge God and further strike up a wager that they would not be tempted by Yetzer Hara. Incidentally, Satan strikes up a wager that Job will turn against him if he endures less of God's blessings and more of his own evil machinations. Both dialogues transpire in the heavenly realm, with all parties overlooking the earth in a manner akin to the Greek gods looking down from Olympus. Where Satan insists that Job would no longer serve him if enough of his privileges are taken from him, the Watchers insist that they would not be swayed by the evil inclination. In both cases, God is obviously correct, and he wins these wagers that are proposed by his divine subjects, or former subjects in the case of Satan. Perhaps one of the most striking and ironic things about this legend is that in their efforts to prove their incorruptibility, the Watchers Semyaza and Azazel proceed to succumb to the Yetzirah almost immediately. The moral of the story shows us that those who are more arrogant are usually the first to be humbled. In this instance, Semyaza and Azazel are shown to believe that they are better than humanity, and that only weak and feeble creatures like man would succumb to something as trivial as the evil inclination. Yet in the very first moments of their presence on the earth, they show less resolve than even a child might have. Their attention is captured by the physical beauty of the mortal women, and they are so overcome by desire and lust that they don't seem to even remember the original purpose of their visit, to demonstrate their imperviousness to such temptation. What's more, their temptations lead them to commit several transgressions, as they teach the mortals sorcery, incantations, and the divining of a ruse, knowledge that God had at one point in time deemed too dangerous for man to acquire. Indeed, those who claim to have been the most virtuous in the heavens are quickly showcased as being the most detestable on the earth. In yet another version of this myth, Semyaza and Azazel don't descend from the heavens so as to prove their virtue in the face of Yetzirah, but instead are kicked out of the heavens by God for having opposed the creation of man. In a similar vein to Iblis in the Islamic tradition, the two angels appear to view mankind as inferior, and as a result, become the primary antagonists of man in this narrative. In this legend, the angels come down to earth, some indicating that they use the same ladder Jacob envisioned in the Genesis account, and disguise themselves as handsome men, for which to deceive and corrupt the mortal women. In a narrative that usually attempts to frame Enoch as the hero, he who was chosen by God for his righteousness, and was such an exemplary figure that he actually got to read the Watchers their punishment, he doesn't actually show up in this version of the narrative. In this legend, Enoch is not even mentioned, but instead we are told of Istahar, a regular mortal woman who isn't chosen by God, isn't shown to have any remarkable characteristics, and doesn't even rely on God to help her out of her situation. Many will associate her name with the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, who we know was also equated with the planet Venus, easily confused in the night sky as the brightest star. What's more, in Mesopotamian mythology, we know that Ishtar's most common symbol was the 8 or 6-pointed star, a symbol said to have been branded on the slaves who worked in her temples. Her association with the star seems to stem from the ancient observation of Venus, where due to its proximity to the sun, would disappear for several days, and then reappear on the opposite horizon. This led some ancient cultures to believe that there were separate stars on each horizon, the morning star and the evening star, one of which may have been a male deity that presided over the arts of war, and one that was a female deity that presided over the arts of love. This observation of Venus would then form the basis of Ishtar's dual nature as the goddess of love and war. How she became the influence for this Istahar in this Jewish legend is not really known. In fact, you might be surprised to learn of the ancient Jews seemingly honouring what would have been a pagan deity by naming a heroine after her, especially since she demonstrates little in the way of love or war. Yet there may be a few historical reasons why such a name was chosen. The ancient Israelites were at one point exposed heavily to Mesopotamian culture, particularly during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BC, when the Judeans lived alongside the Babylonians. Here they would have encountered the Babylonian language, its associated mythology, and come to know of their gods. Even after returning to Judah, the Judeans, in their 50 to 70 years of living in Babylonian captivity, would have more than likely adopted elements of their legends and the greater lore, names included. Even if these stories were later reshaped into the Jewish moral framework, various names like Ishtar, albeit becoming Istahar, could have easily been preserved. Another idea is that by naming the heroine in this legend after the likes of Ishtar, it worked in stripping and repurposing the original pagan goddess into a more appropriate character, someone the Jewish audience could find admirable, and who did not conflict with their own deity. After all, we know all too well from the biblical account how Yahweh felt about additional gods and goddesses. Reducing Ishtar to a mere mortal woman here would make her far more congruent with Jewish belief, and also present her in a way that was not adversarial to Yahweh, but instead deferent. One might say that this can be observed even by the fact that Istahar resists the likes of Semyaza, where others could not. This might be exemplary of the Jewish writers deliberately subverting what one might expect of the pagan goddess, a seductive fertility goddess who by all accounts probably would have loved the likes of Semyaza and probably would have seduced him. If anything, Istahar acts with relative grace and decorum, the likes that we wouldn't expect of Ishtar, who in her own mythology is shown to be volatile and aggressive. In this then, the presence of a name resembling Ishtar does not mean ancient Jews in this legend were honouring a Babylonian goddess. More likely, it reflects one of three things: the cultural borrowing from Mesopotamia, the recycling of older mythic motifs about the planet Venus, or the deliberate reinterpretation of a pagan name, so it fits within the Jewish narrative. According to Howard Schwartz, most versions of this myth see Istahar uttering the ineffable name of God, which subsequently grants her the ability of flight, of which she's able to use to fly toward the sanctuary of heaven. As mentioned, this is much like Lilith in the alphabet of Ben Sira, who also is seen to utter the ineffable name of God and fly out from the Garden of Eden. The key difference here is that where Lilith utters the name as a sign of rebellion, Istahar does so as a sign of self-preservation. Considering God does not punish Istahar, but rather rewards her, we learn that there are instances where uttering this holy name can be beneficial, perhaps specifically when one earnestly needs help. Yet we do see another legend where Istahar does not utter the name of God, but rather tricks Semyaza in a more bizarre fashion. Here she baits Semyaza into giving her his wings, and when the angel refuses, telling her he can't actually take off his wings, she insists all the more. Eventually, Semyaza becomes so frustrated with her that he does separate his wings from his back and places them on her, thus granting her the power of flight. Having secured his wings, Istahar takes to the skies and flies off to heaven, where again she is made into a star. Semyaza's fate is then left unknown to us, though given this implication, it would seem he remained on the earth as a wingless angel, and thus was never ever capable of returning to the heavens. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to leave this video a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.